Hello, and welcome back to the Cackling Jack podcast and our special episode of Hannibalween. Again, happy Hannibalween, everybody.
Hannibalween never dies.
No, never dies. And this is Sherry of the Phantasmic Four. And what I would like to kind of talk about in this section is the idea of metamorphosis and change as an overriding theme of the entire series, from novels to movies to the TV show. And there's no one example to set on. Originally, I had been thinking about, all the different symbolisms and elements of meaning that you can find in Brian Fuller's TV show, but that, there's just not enough time in a 20-minute segment, much less a full hour. So I figure we can focus on change and kind of talk about, every character that we see has some sort of change. And like metamorphosis, change is never easy. It's always painful. And in the world of Hannibal, it's especially so. If you just take a look at Dr. Chilton in the series, the TV series itself, he probably gets the worst end of the stick, to be honest. Each season, he just goes from bad to worse for the man. Even though his character itself doesn't experience a metamorphosis as far as fundamental impetus and, for his motivations for what he does, those things never change, but his physical attributes change.
Yes, but at least no one fills him with bees.
It kind of gets, you haven't seen the third season yet, so I think he would almost prefer to be filled with bees to what happens to him.
Okay.
Agreed.
That sounds like fun.
Yes.
Yeah, and while you're saying that, I'm trying to think of because we went over a lot about how one of the cool things about the whole mythology and the whole world orbiting around this character is how many different fraught situations and screwed up conflicts he can create and you can put him in, and how much it affects no matter who he comes into contact with. And I know this is just in some part it's drama 101, but you're definitely right, Sherry. This is even for a horror character transformation. Whoever gets stuck with Hannibal, whoever gets stuck with Hannibal's antagonist, whoever gets locked in these battles and in these relationships and these manipulations, comes out very, very, very badly for it. It's not like one of those slasher franchises where someone always drives off at the end to upbeat music having emerged stronger. I'm thinking, like, as I think Max said, I think it's probably Clarice in the most famous version of Silence of the Lambs, who comes out the best and who comes closest to that kind of hero's journey kind of thing. But even that is where she just has to get meaner, basically.
Right.
And less trusting and more narrow-minded, almost.
And just like everybody else, her change is also painful. Like, she'll never be able to move past, she'll never be able to forget that experience that she had in Wild Bill's house, which I think is kind of the culmination of what her character goes through. And I think the great thing about the Hannibal series is it shows, like you said, Mike, nobody kind of just walks away, and it really kind of shows people don't just let things roll off them. Horrible things can happen to them. What it shows best is how people adapt and change to even begin to cope with the horrible things that happen to them. Now, sometimes those coping mechanisms are not so great and result in very bad demises for them. And other times they could be like Freddie Lowndes, who uses those changes to her advantage. I'm talking about the one in the series, the TV series. He's probably the only one I can think of who goes from season 1 to season 3 without actually physically getting hurt. Psychologically and emotionally, I'm sure she goes through hell, but she still manages to keep that journalistic kind of ice queen ideal going, and she never takes off the gloves, both figuratively and literally.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch her character, you'll see she's pretty much always wearing a set of gloves, which is, again, Cinema 101. If we want to hide a character's intentions or show that a character is hiding her real intentions, or is pretty much just a straight out liar, you make them wear gloves.
Or it's also a nice symbolic way of showing that she doesn't like getting her hands dirty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is probably the thing that anyone who comes into contact with Hannibal and anyone who has to deal with him, not getting your hands dirty is kind of the best thing you could hope for, and the least likely result.
I mean, the fact that she survives a situation with him where he, straightforward calls her rude, I'm like, how the hell did she manage to survive that?
And and that happens. That exchange happens in the first season. So for her to still be here there's obviously something's going on with her that she somehow has gotten a pass, and whether it's, maybe it's like Hannibal just can't be bothered because she's so kind of annoying and just.
I don't know if it's that so much as, Hannibal isn't the only serial killer that she comes in close contact with and manages to survive. Obviously, there's Dr. Abel Gideon, Eddie Izzard's character.
True. Yes.
Mike, isn't Dr. Abel Gideon awesome?
Yes. Mac, I can't believe we didn't mention this already in all of our babbling about this. That there's one of the Hannibal Lecter rivals, frenemies, bros, foes, fellow serial killers in the show is Eddie Izzard, and it's pretty great.
And he's good.
And I had to say, the PS4 exclusive TV show, I guess, Powers, which has Shardo Copley as like a detective in a city full of like superheroes. Eddie Izzard plays the bad guy in that series as well, and he is absolutely frightening. So yes, Eddie Izzard can play a really good bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Really surprising.
Like it took personally testimonies. Let's all give testimonies. It took me about 2 hours. 2 hours about. But I finally stopped thinking we're going to run out of cake at this rate.
Tea and cake or death. No. Oh, good memories there. But back to what was going on with Freddie Lowndes. She has a close encounter with Dr. Abel Gideon. She has a close encounter with the mushroom guy. She has close encounters with Hannibal all the time. She gets caught doing very rude things to Hannibal all the time, and yet he still lets her live. And I think what it is for the serial killers is they see her as a means of broadcasting their deeds. She's their way of communicating with each other and the public. So I think the reason she's able to stay around is because she's serving a purpose. Now, once she stops serving that purpose, I don't think she'll make it.
That's a really good point, because also in the first season, there's, when Abel Gideon is, Chilton has him, and Abel Gideon is saying, I am the Chesapeake Ripper. What are you talking about? I am. They show Hannibal, looking at his tablet and looking at titlecrime.com getting, like, you can see it in his face. Like, he's like,
oh, he's a big jealous baby. He's a big jealous baby. He is. It's so funny.
He is. He's, sitting there in his office being like, bitch took my, he's taking my spotlight, and
I'm
not happy about it. And
pretty much, yeah.
It's all, through Freddie Lowndes and titlecrime.com that's happening. So
yeah.
And that's actually kind of a really dark satire on media in general, because whenever there's a shooting or a massacre, what's one of the first things we hear is the dogma or the personal doctrine of the person who committed the murders.
Yep.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that actually while in our wind up to this. It's not quite the same. It's not the same at all. But in Mac and what you just said and the way it's treated, I was thinking of not only that, but how I mean, we're all talking about this because we love watching it as drama, and we love reading it as drama, and so we're complicit too. But it's like how when something like Columbine happens, whenever any of these spree killings happen, or when real serial killers are known to be out there, or when someone like Charles Manson does their stupid, bloody, pointless, destructive work, people really can't get enough of kind of speculating about it, reading about it, fetishizing it, talking about it, and it is kind of that will thing. It is kind of the Hannibal Lecter adversary thing, is we're all obsessed with understanding the killer. We're all obsessed with understanding how the monster thinks. And that's what half of all those, all that free think piece that not any now, I think we're just becoming so used to it these days, unfortunately, but that a spree killer gets. And that goes back to Jack the Ripper too. One of the reasons that we all remember him was that he was basically a media sensation. Right. And he did it, right at around the time that first started becoming a thing.
Right.
And so then that's the weird thing, is that we call these characters guilty and call the people who are drawn in to Hannibal Lecter guilty. I say everyone emerges just a little bit worse for it and shows just a little bit of the worst side of themselves. And the little joke tickling the back of your head there is always, yeah, kind of like the audience for Hannibal Lecter movies.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because, again, I hate referring to the third season is so beautiful. I mean, I can't. I just watching it again is just, it gets better with each viewing. But I was just noticing there's a line that Hannibal says to Gillian Anderson's character, Dr. Maurier, when he's killing somebody who's way too handsome. Like when he killed this character, I was like, no, he's too cute. The British guy, Lindsay.
Yes,
in the first episode,
the Will
guy
Graham
from Dominion. Yeah.
I mean, it's like Will Graham light.
Yeah, he's Will Graham light. He's definitely very European and wants to have a threesome with Bedelia and Hannibal, which I was like, dude, we couldn't follow this one through. This would have been awesome, but it doesn't happen, sadly.
So
there's a line that he says during that scene when he's killing this guy to Bedelia, saying, "Are you watching? Are you observing? Are you participating?" And she says, "I'm observing." And he says, "By simple observation, you're a participant."
Right.
And so that's kind of a reference, I think, to the audience at large, in line with what Mike is saying. Like we're kind of complicit in this whole mess because we're sitting there watching and enjoying it.
Yep.
Just sitting every week watching the show.
To go along with that, one of the things that I noticed a lot in the third season, and one of kind of the biggest jokes in the Tumblrverse was that in the third season, the fourth wall is almost completely broken at certain points.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few scenes where he straight up looks straight into the camera and almost winks at us. It's like
off The Office.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And it's because of exactly what you just said. We're now totally complicit in it because we've been on the whole journey and we can't get enough of it.
Yeah. That's very true. But now that doesn't mean that. I think that's just a testament to human nature, less than us as people, of course. And there's always, that again, if we want to talk about the thin line between monster and human, which is another big theme that goes through the entire series. Is that line, and the monster is represented in two forms, with the Raven Stag and the Wendigo, which I'll go into later. And I remember you mentioned in the last section that you were really upset when the stag went down, but the stag is actually a representation of evil. inside of Will.
Right.
So I was like, I'm not as sad by that for some reason.
Now all I'm picturing is a version of this where the dark dream monster analogy thing is a lion rabbit.
Yeah.
The evil lion rabbit emerging from the swamp. I can't believe that those things exist.
They do exist.
But we're going to have to edit out that part about the lion rabbit because the audience has no clue what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. we explain the joke, or we edit it
we
out?
could just leave out the lion rabbit.
Okay.
Funicula.
Oh, I love
The
Funicula.
Funicula!
Oh.
Okay.
Vampire bunny. Yes.
Mm-hmm. But actually, Sherry, you said something in the little notes that we exchanged, just kind of vaguely planning this out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Said operatic masks. What did you mean by that?
Well, when you think about, the opera in the old sense with the people especially with Hannibal, like I was saying before, with Hannibal in his people suit, the Wendigo is actually Hannibal's real persona. And the Hannibal that we see walking around in his fancy suit and tie is really just an operatic mask. So when we get the peek behind Will's eyes of the Wendigo with the black face and not black face in that sense, but the black charred skin. He's actually supposed to be he's actually burnt.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize this before. He's actually been burned. That's his humanity. He's been burned away. He's gaunt. And, the Wendigo, for people who aren't familiar with it, that's the old Native American mythos of somebody who's turned to cannibalism. And because of that, they've lost their humanity and they become this creature that, is always alone, and is always hungry. And they continuously grow and grow and grow because they can't stop eating, and yet they never put on weight. Like, they're always skin and bones, but they get bigger and bigger. And sometimes the Wendigo is represented as a man with antlers and hooves, which, they did that in this series very clearly so that we could all understand more. It took me a while to feel like when I finally figured out what the heck that thing was, I had a moment of just, oh my God, it's a friggin' Wendigo.
Yep.
This is amazing.
Uh-huh.
And that, that really shows that Hannibal is the monster. Seeing him in that form is that operatic mask falling away. And we get to see the reality of his character.
Right.
But I still like Massey's. Oh my God, I called him Massey, and I told you not to do that, Lindsay. I'm sorry. Yeah, we still love Mass because he's fantastic.
We do.
And that's without even getting into Buffalo Bill of all things.
Yeah, well, he literally puts on the people suit.
Right.
True.
That's the only way that he can find to change, to become what he wants to be. Even though he's not truly a transgender or even a transsexual, he believes that that's how his metamorphosis has to go, and he fails spectacularly at it.
Quick question: does the Death's Head moth appear in Hannibal?
There is. I'm trying to remember where the nod is to the moth. There is.
So
the moth. Oh, the third season.
Yeah, and it's when they're
reference.
Still in Europe,
and at Hannibal's childhood home.
And it's the guy who
killed Misha.
Right. Yeah, and he.
Yeah, the guy killed Misha. Hannibal ate Misha, and he's been keeping the guy prisoner using Chio.
Right.
And he gets out, and Chio's forced to kill him. And then Will comes along and transforms his body into. He basically turns him into a living chrysalis. Is that the right word? Chrysalis.
Yeah,
chrysalis.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's the duck rabbit beer. Yes, he basically turns him into a living chrysalis with the wings spread as a kind of a calling card for Hannibal to see later, to know that Will was there and that he's looking for him.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's also a little bit of a nod to it, I think, in the first season also. That episode with the guy who sees everybody's heads on fire.
Oh, yeah.
And
he turns people into angels.
Right. And
yeah. I love that.
And then he himself he hangs himself up.
He becomes an angel himself.
Right.
Yeah.
Which that is like the $1 million question. Like, how did he get himself up there? Like, and then he's an
actual angel. He flew up there with his skin flaps. I don't know.
Exactly. So how did he get his skin flaps and then I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a question that I think must not be tried to answer. Like, another one of the questions, like, how did Hannibal manage to keep a piece of Georgia Madgen, even though he wasn't in the room when she died? And, you can assume that the people kind of flew into the attendants ran into the room as soon as they realized her oxygen tank was on fire. And poor Georgia Madgen. She was one of those hapless characters that we all, it's kind of like Franklin, just what's going on?
Which is another thing that all this intensity and warping and breaking and ruining and cruelty, and this, kind of no universe for old men kind of thing that Hannibal always seems to bring with him, is that it really, one thing that it really makes you feel for anyone who seems even slightly human or vulnerable. It makes it stand out all the more. And I think, Mac, I'm trying to think, in Manhunter and in the books, can you think of innocent characters, or not innocent-ish characters, who actually get out or get something out of all this?
Molly and Walter. When you think Molly and Walter?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in such a big, rambling universe that has so many different forms, that low count is really saying something. I mean, even for any horror, you got to feel sympathy for something. You got to feel attached to something that's going to be lost or destroyed or mangled in some way. But yeah, I think that's and when you get into all the breaking and the changing and the ruining of everything, one of the things that stands out is how small, like, if you're looking at something like a Friday the 13th movie, even like one of the early ones where they were still trying to be serious in some way, like, you're like, it's like the opposite of a 10 little Indians thing. If you're watching something like Alien, where the inhuman, incomprehensible monster is one thing, and everyone else is a pretty good person that you want to see get by. And what the problem is that you're steadily losing it. Whereas,
except Ash. Ash deserved to die.
Yeah. Which we'll be talking more about soon. But yeah, this is like the opposite. This is the opposite thing, is that we provide you with so little unwrecked and unpredatory people, unpredatory humanity to start with. Your glass starts so close to empty that the tension is there from the beginning, and that's...
Yeah. I think probably one of the saddest wreckages of people was Alana Bloom for me, because she, for all of her, all of her know-how and her real, sharp insight into humanity, and she's seen the ugliest side of it, and we know that because she's always in the hospital for the criminally insane. She's interviewed Abel Gideon. She's seen humanity at its worst, and yet she still has faith and will until the bloody end. but then, once Hannibal basically forces the change on her by breaking her body,
Yeah.
she has that awful, and it was heart-wrenching to see her in the third season, how much she's changed as a character, and you can see he just basically dragged her down. Because she was I love Alana Bloom. I don't know. Maybe it's just massive girl crush.
Mhm.
Maybe it's Henrietta de Vernus. I love, not Henrietta. What's her first name? I'm mixing up Henrietta Park and Caroline de Vernus.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, Caroline de Vernus is amazing, and she does a great job. And I always, she and freaking Beverly Katz, I'm like, please don't. Why are we doing this? No.
Beverly. Oh.
And it's also the only time you see the guys who play the forensic people really show a sense of loss.
Yeah.
Life that was taken from them. And that's par of course for their job. I mean, that's what they have to do. They have to be able to face the loss of people every day. And so they have their own coping. I love those two guys.
They are amazing. And Beverly's death, you're right. It's
I think that's the only time I cried during the series was when Beverly died.
What?
Yeah.
I cried every week. No.
He has a heart of stone. Come on.
I find weird things funny, but Beverly's death was really, really tragic for me, and I was very upset by it. Maybe because I see a lot of, I identified with the character a lot. I really liked how badass she was.
She was badass.
Yeah, and yet she was also willing, even though she found the physical evidence of what Will did to Abigail Hobbs under his fingernails, and yet she was still willing to try and listen to him and give him the benefit of the doubt, even though it was going against every instinct that she had as a forensic detective. She was still willing to, and then, unfortunately, that's what led to her fight Hannibal, and we know the rest.
That's how important the job was to her, was, she was going to go into the lion's den, and because she had a huge hunch and she was starting to put things together, and so she, she knew what she was getting herself into was dangerous, and she did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. It was her job. So, yeah, she was totally badass, and her death was the only moment where Brian Zeller and what's his first name?
Aaron Abrams.
Right, but Price's first name, what's his first name? I don't know. Scott Thompson's character, what's his first name?
Oh, I couldn't even begin to. I can't remember. Oh, it's terrible. For people who watch the show over and over again, you would think that we would know. There are a lot of characters.
Kids in the Hall, Scott Thompson?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Wait,
I think we just hooked him on the show.
Yeah. Okay.
We hooked Matt, I think, just now. That was the only time where, they constantly have this kind of hilarious back and forth banter going on, and Beverly's death was the only thing that kind of made them be serious for a second and kind of
break down.
Break down and
have a moment of reality before they put on their forensic gloves once again and try to get back into it.
More gloves.
More gloves. I think the latex ones represent different things from the ones that Freddie wears.
Okay, well, you guys have me at a total impasse now because I don't know whether to talk next about how little sex there is in any.
And I love that. I love that about this show. I am fine with it.
like, you talk about all this stuff, and it's also psychological and intense, and like different forms of intense love and fucked up frenemyship, and it's so full of almost everything else that is sensual but not sex.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge vampire thing too. Now that, well, it's a huge original kind of Dracula thing, is that it's all something approaching sex. It's all bodily fluids and transformation and intermingling and biting and touching and violating, but it's the one thing it almost never is, I guess, unless you're Anne Rice, is is real, actual sex. And that absence is, I don't know. I don't have anything compared.
But I think what also when there is sex,
yeah.
I think when there are the sex scenes, and what I like about there being so few sex scenes is that I actually really enjoy the sex scenes even more, because you have that intense buildup. Everything is sensual. Everything is about the different senses. You know, you got the taste, you got visual, you've got sound, you've got, you know, if you can almost put yourself, you can almost feel everything coming out of the TV screen, and then once you get that final crescendo of the actual sex scene, it's actually way more enjoyable than if they were just boinking every other episode, like in other TV shows, and you know.
And it's shot in such a way, especially I'm thinking of the scenes in season 3, in such a way where it's deconstructed.
I love that. The kaleidoscope.
The scene, was it in season 3 also, where, so let's see, Hannibal and Alana are together, and then Will and
that's season 2. That's season 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, I've seen that.
I've seen it. Yeah.
And it's shot in such a way where you don't really see anything.
But it's still hot.
But it's still hot, and it's almost like a threesome.
Yeah, exactly, because it interchanges the different characters with each other. And you don't, I mean, obviously Will is picturing Alana, but at the same time, it makes you wonder, is he picturing Hannibal, or is Hannibal picturing Will in Alana's place? And it's just, and, you know, Margot is obviously, the poor Margot, just a stand-in, that poor woman.
Right.
But she, you know, it just makes that scene. And then, of course, they happen to throw the Wendigo in, just, whoo, here's the Wendigo. What? No. Oh, my God. Why you do this to it? It makes you remember what she's having sex with. It's not just Hannibal.
Right.
It's a monster. And, I mean, you know, it makes those, I mean, just across the board, the sex scenes that you know, much more memorable and enjoyable. And then, of course, you know, Richard Armitage, Dollahide's sex scene with Reba was ridiculously hot. I was sitting there going, this is allowed on TV, even though the show has so much violence and gore. I'm like, well, I don't know if this is allowed. You know?
And also the scene with the tiger.
Oh, sensual. So sensual.
Like, I almost started to doubt myself. Like, is it just me, or is this super hot? Like, or am I just weird?
No. I'm saying the same thing.
Like, I mean, I was almost uncomfortable at how hot it was.
Is this bestiality? I don't know.
And just like, and I mean, but that is a huge testament to the scene, because, you know, it is very intimate, and yet it's not a sex scene.
No, well, it's, you know, it's a situation that she's never experienced before. So she's never had somebody offer that kind of opportunity to her before. And that's, you know, that's the scene where you know that they're going to get it on. She's just had probably the most sensual experience in her life, because she knows that he knows everything she experiences is through the touch and through the smell and through feeling the heartbeat and hearing the heartbeat of the tiger. And you know, he sees her having this experience with the tiger, and he's like, well, if she can feel that way about an animal, surely she can have that kind of experience with me too. And then,
Right.
of course, you see the immediate doubt on his face. Oh, I don't know.
Whoa.
But, yep, that didn't last long.
And then, so the other thing about the one of the scenes where Hannibal and Alana are together, and this is just a random aside, but one of the things that is so great about the series is that there are pretty subtle weavings of lines from the books and lines from the movies and lines from wherever else.
Shots from the movies.
And shots from the movies.
The amount of play that they get out of people walking into and out of the asylum, and it always being some kind of twist where it's immediately obvious that they're referencing those first, those Clarice Starling scenes from Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
And they play with that shot like 10 different times, and who's in the cell and who's where and who's coming there because why. They have fun.
There's the scene where it's the morning and they're waking up the morning after or whatever, and somebody is at the door.
Jack Crawford coming to question Hannibal. Yeah.
And before Hannibal answers the door, he says something about a census taker.
Yeah.
Right?
He ate the census. We know he ate the census taker.
Right. Obviously. So that always struck me, just because it was so kind of masterfully done. Then also because the timbre of Mads' voice when he says census taker.
Mm-hmm.
Accent.
There's, again, on Tumblr, one of the things that I found on Tumblr was somebody had isolated that one phrase, and I just played it over and over and over again because it was like.
Did it make you feel tingly?
It made me feel a little tingly. And by a little, I mean kind of a lot.
Oh my.
And then, what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh.
She's distracted by the census taker.
I know. God. I'm fanning myself. There's also a shot in season 2, the horse episode, Sherry.
Yes, where the guy comes out of the horse and
where the
Hannibal's going like, that's sick even for me.
Exactly. So that's great. But there's also a scene of him
with the sheep, petting the sheep. Yes,
he's petting a lamb.
Yep, I remember that.
So that happened.
Yeah.
There's a GIF of that, and it's fascinating and beautiful and wonderful. So, so there's constant weaving in and out.
Yeah, and that should have been really obvious. You guys are right in that. I mean, we talk about becoming the dragon. We talk about all these animal analogies where it's like the transformations and the potential for anything to transform into something mean and compelling at any time. It's all over the place, and it should have been real obvious, but there's so many animal names and animal concepts and monster names and monster concepts built into the whole thing.
Well, you've got the guy who becomes the cave bear wolf.
Right. Yeah, I was just going to say.
that guy was interesting.
I mean, everyone. Buffalo Bill, you got Red Dragon, you got this. Everyone is about to become some kind of animal, or, as you said, Sherry, is actually an animal.
Animal already
wearing the human mask, and yeah. Although, before I forget, we were just talking about vampires and kids in the hall and sex. So no, now you guys are not getting out of this.
What?
Which kid in the hall was this?
Scott Thompson.
God, okay, yeah. No, Scott was the victim. Okay. My favorite Kids in the Hall sketch of all time is about a vampire picking someone up.
Oh, the gay vampire.
The gay vampire.
Oh, it's hysterical.
Hockey game. Yeah.
Yes.
and I can't think about any of this stuff at all without like thinking, do you mind if I swoop? So that's my next free, completely random plug. It's called After the Hockey Game. It's a Kids in the Hall sketch from a million years ago, and it's roughly the funniest damn thing.
The guy finally goes, well, all right, do you got enough beer for me to get through this? It's terrible.
So good. So good. But also I was thinking, asylums and castles. Where did they fit all this? Because I mean, you've got, the vampire's castle is the place where all the madness is. The vampire's castle is a symbol of luxury, but the symbol of luxury that's decayed. And the asylum that runs through all this, whether it's the asylum in all the Hannibal things, whether it's the asylum that Renfield is in Dracula, whether it's the asylum imagery and the madness imagery that runs through Jack the Ripper, or whether it's Arkham Asylum, either in Lovecraft with the Joker. Are the asylums vampire castles for the 20th and 21st centuries and whatever?
I don't think so. I think the asylum.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I think the asylum really just represents where we're all afraid of winding up.
Mm-hmm.
It's the symbol for humanity's greatest fear, which is losing our minds, or being thought of as having lost our minds. Because once you're put into an asylum, ain't nothing you're going to say that people are going to believe.
Right.
So,
exactly.
And that's like where Renfield's curse comes in. Is he's in there clawing at the walls and eating spiders and saying his master's coming. Everybody's like, "Ooh, this guy needs a lobotomy," and nobody believes and again, with mirroring that with what goes on with Will sitting in his cell saying, "The monster's right there. Hello."
Right.
Yeah.
Hannibal's sitting right there, and he's, the real killer here. And people are like, nah, you're nuts. Even Alana Bloom was saying he doesn't know what he's talking about. He has encephalitis. Dude's a little crazy. I still like him, but he's still crazy.
Well, and Alana let her judgment was obviously clouded by other things, which is surprising for me for Alana's character. It's like she let sex get in the way of the reality of the situation. And
even before they had, even before she and Hannibal got together in the sexy times, she took his word at face value because she had no other reason to doubt him.
Right.
He's, she'd known him for years before the whole interaction with Will began. So she believed, he was so masterful at manipulating people to the point where she couldn't even recognize it with all of her training, that she would never question it. Like, even when he took Abigail Hobbs out of the hospital and gave her shrooms, she believed that he had just given her half a Valium, even though she clearly was not behaving like somebody who had just taken half a Valium. She was tripping.
Yeah, but
half a Valium, my ass.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what Dracula's Castle always was too, though, because because the experience of going to Dracula's Castle, the experience for John Harker, was very, very similar, because that's the place where Dracula could have the power. And like you said, it's not just with Renfield that he takes the power of anyone else to resist him away by locking them in a place where they go crazy.
I'm going to have to say no, actually. I would see, if you want to talk about Hannibal taking power away from people, because Renfield was, destroyed mentally by Dracula in Dracula's castle and then wound up in the asylum, whereas Will was destroyed by Hannibal outside of the asylum, and we could call his office his castle. I mean, he has his mind palace, but his castle really is his office in his house. That's where he draws people in. He draws them in with his fancy ways and his luxury in his food, and he's, he manipulates them, and he really has those really intense combative psychotherapy sessions with them, and that's where he's able to exert his influence the most.
Yeah, you're definitely right. That's definitely true for that version. But I guess I'm thinking more of like both the Brian Cox version and the Anthony Hopkins version. Like the way they were shot and the way it was used and the way they set up those versions of the story was, I mean, that's that big famous, AFI 100 most famous film, whatever the fuck list it's going to be on. It's where you've got the famous shot where Clarice Starling comes down the hall, and Hannibal's not sitting in a cell. He's standing right there, like he is king, and he is God, and he is waiting for you. And he somehow, even though he's locked up, he so physically controls the space. And in Manhunter, that version of Will has to come to the prison almost to, I don't know, that's where Hannibal holds court in that version. Don't you think? Yeah, am I just pulling this out of?
No, I don't think so. I don't think you're pulling out of nowhere. I can see where you're drawing those parallels.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird mashup because that, I'm sorry. I promise not to make this too much about Batman, as much as anything that can ever not be about Batman. But that's kind of like the way the version of Arkham Asylum there was used too a lot. That's where the heroes and the victims had to go to face the monsters kind of in their lair. And there's something about you're right. I guess there's a lot of different versions of it, but there's some kind of castle and there's some kind of asylum.
Yeah.
And that's just really interesting to me. And they're all these imposing fortress-like places.
Yeah.
And one is, it's whether the one is the place where you go to go crazy, or the place that you go to be a god, or the place where you go to meet the monster. It all kind of like creeps around each other. It's pretty cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that they're in two of those versions at least. Hannibal's cell and Hannibal's asylum was his castle. And
well, he does that. I mean, that's his way of handling it. He had to turn it into his castle, usually by, living inside his own head. He had his drawings in Silence of the Lambs and whatnot, where,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, those were his windows to the outside world. And I like the idea of the memory palace being another form of a castle for him, because clearly Hannibal Lecter's mind is so expansive that it can't just be contained like our crazy little bumblebee heads, where we just kind of flit around like do 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 do. He has to have some way of controlling it, and the only way he can do that is taking over the space himself. Which he does that.
He talks about that in the at the second season finale. They have this big, beautiful conversation about their mind palaces, and Hannibal says, if I'm ever apprehended, my mind palace won't just be a mnemonic device. I will live there. I'm gonna live inside my head, and because that's.
And he does that in all incarnations. He lives in his head.
Right. And when he's apprehended, and if he's apprehended, he can still feel like he's somehow in control and controlling his environment.
Yeah. And God, this could be a whole. We might need to do 9 podcasts.
Well, it was so hard to try and decide what to talk about, like whether we want to talk about religious symbolisms, whether we want to talk about the food symbolisms, whether we want to talk about, cinematography and, the different shots and how it was just like Brian Fuller, you can tell he had a fun time with this series. And
I think a lot of fun. That's part of why I think that both, in all these versions, so many good good actors come in and out of it. Partially is this extremeness and this ambiguities must be a lot of fun to be a part of, at least as long as you're pretending. But that's I think that's an answer to the question. Maybe, I don't know, because I remember we had a little riff in the earlier section about how psychiatry and psychopaths and were these, you know, sophisticated figures of weird power, and how it used to be that it was the lords and the removed people in the high castles that were the untouchable power people. And maybe that's the answer. Mind palaces.
Mind Palace.
Mind Palace.
I love Mind Palace. I'm so impressed by people who can actually do a Mind Palace.
Yeah, and the ability to control that, and the ability to control how your mind works, and the ability to control and influence the minds of others.
Yeah.
Was
Like,
always
I'll walk into a room and forget why I walked in there, much less try and have all these rooms in my head.
Exactly.
Bump into the door frame on the way into the room. You're way ahead of me.
Done that. Well, no, I do that too. I do that too.
Mind Palace, man.
Yeah.
All the time.
So basically, this character is awesome, and a lot of great storytelling has been done about it. And now I'm afraid of it and want to see it all over again.
Well, I think there could actually be like a PhD dissertation in here.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've seen scholarly articles on Hannibal Lecter. Like just doing a search when I was doing my research on, you know, this different themes of the show and symbolism and all that, I stumbled across, I just did Google Scholar, whammo. Oh my God, just, you know, so much analysis. And that's, you know, it's a fictional character. And yet, you know, like all the great characters in fiction, he just has that draw.
Yeah. And let's not forget one of his superpowers, maybe his main superpower, is how other people can't stop thinking about him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how
Whoa.
And how, you know, he always makes us think that we can't stop thinking about him because of, you know, something that we've done, and, you know,
that
we're in control. And like Bedelia says in season 3,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, season 3.
We are not in control. Like, we think we are, but Hannibal is always the prime mover. And
you will not make him more like you. He will make you more like him.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Oh,
and he sees it as a good thing. He's like, I'm going to help you become.
Exactly. I mean, that's...
Oh, no, please don't.
That's what I was talking about before, when we were talking about the final kind of smackdown between Dollarhide and Will and Hannibal. That's exactly what Hannibal said. He said, you know, this is all I wanted for you, because this is your true nature. This is you embracing who you really are without any, you know, trying to be something else or trying to avoid it or, you know, be anything other than who you are. That's, you know, so he's a crafty motherfucker, and he looks good doing it, and it's just...
I think she's talking about masks again.
I think that's a good note to end on, actually.
Yes. Okay. Poor Mac.
And cut off. And end scene.
End scene. But we're going to do the Hannibal Survival Guide. We kind of referred to it a little bit.
Yeah.
Lindsay?
So, the Hannibal Survival Kit.
Wait, so do you actually, since I've said most of the things that are in heads that are mine, so do you want to just go around the table and make the Hannibal Lecter Survival Guide the last bit, and I'll be happy to close it out. Just say goodbye.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
what we're gonna do.
Okay, great.
Lindsay can start us off.
So the Hannibal survival kit for me, obviously, is don't go to any dinner parties that you're invited to.
First rule.
And this is the most maybe important one for not just in Hannibal land, but for real life. Be polite. Be nice. Don't be a dick. And you will, prevent yourself from getting eaten. I think hopefully that's the key.
Even then.
It's pronounced Chianti.
Chianti.
Yeah.
You're gonna be eaten next, Mac.
That wasn't very
Oh.
polite of you, sir.
Oh, trust me, I've got a very fatty liver. You'll be fine.
Nice.
Sherry, your tips for all the nice people?
Don't wreck other people's shit. Don't stab a knife into his armchair. Don't leave your dirty tissues lying around.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Don't mess up his pictures, by rifling through them. There are clear signs when somebody is OCD, and if you're so wrapped up in your own stupid little head that you can't recognize it, then maybe you should be eaten.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's my idea.
Well, my only version of the Hannibal Lecter survival guide that makes any sense is War Games. The only winning move against Hannibal Lecter is not to play with Hannibal Lecter.
Yes.
That's
Willing
true.
to walk away and forget about Hannibal Lecter and not know. Good luck doing it.
Yeah. Good luck.
As Will Graham says, stay away from Hannibal Lecter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's probably the best, even though it's probably the hardest thing to do.
Of course.
He can't even follow his own advice.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Be willing to not know. Be willing to not play. Good luck with that.
Good luck with that.
Indeed.
So I think that wraps up our happy Hannibalween, and a happy Hannibalween to all of you. It has
Happy
been a great time.
Yay.
And next week, I believe, Mac, do you want to tell the folks what we have in store for them?
Yes, we will be looking at the Evil Dead franchise, as well as Sam Raimi, the man, the myth, and his influences.
The legend.
Yay!
Looking forward to that. See you guys all again in about a week.
All right.
Goodbye.
Hold on, can I try it one more time?
Yeah, go ahead.
No.
No, I meant the noise. You broke my flow!